Let's get some more reaction now to the Chancellor's measures to support businesses and their employees. We can speak now to Gemma Tetlow, who is the Chief Economist at the Institute for Government and joins me now via webcam from Surrey. Hello to you, Gemma.
Hello.
What did you make of the statement? Was it what you were hoping? Was it what you were expecting?
I think it was what we were expecting, in the sense that the measures announced today very much focused on the next phase of the government's reaction, so trying to support the economy as it recovers from the lockdown and try to get back to working again. Distinct from the first phase, which was supporting the economy while everything was shut down, and then the final phase, which the Chancellor alluded to, which is what do we do in the sort of medium term, trying to get the public finances back into balance and back on track. I think perhaps today's measures would have been somewhat disappointing in their scale, and it's perhaps odd to say that when you talk about a Chancellor standing up and announcing an extra £25 billion of measures on top of the £5 billion of fast-tracked investment spending that the Prime Minister announced last week. But they're small in the sense that they're small compared to the scale of government support that has been rolled out over the last 3 months during the lockdown, and they're relatively small compared to what some other country governments have done in the last few months to try and stimulate their economies.
So what would be the answer, though? Because some people will say you can't just keep throwing money at it. You have to in the short term, but you can't keep doing that.
That's right, and the Treasury clearly faces very difficult questions in this next phase. In a sense, the choices in the first phase were relatively simple: to do whatever it took to keep the economy on ice while the lockdown measures were in place. Things are much harder to calibrate correctly in this next phase. The government doesn't want to do too much. It doesn't want to waste public money stimulating businesses to get back that would be perfectly well able to get back up and running and to take their workers back from furlough as they're able to open back up again. Similarly, the government doesn't want, and the Chancellor mentioned this in his speech, to keep the wage subsidy schemes going and tying workers into jobs that actually have no realistic prospect of ever coming back. On the other hand, if we think at the moment that the wage subsidy scheme is pumping £10 billion a month into businesses to help them pay the wages of their workers, there is a real risk that once you end that scheme at the end of October and replace it with this £1,000 job retention bonus, but that amounts to only a maximum of £9 billion in total across all businesses, and that won't be paid out until February. There's a real risk that businesses that in October may still be facing higher costs and difficulties operating normally if social distancing measures are still in place. They may still need support through the autumn. Even if they have a long-term future, they may still be struggling somewhat in the autumn, and that's the difficult trade-off that the Treasury is making.
Do you think the Treasury would have been better off going for more targeted support?
The measures today, in some sense, were quite targeted. The VAT cut and the Eat Out to Help Out vouchers are very much targeted on the hospitality sector and accommodation sectors, which are some of those that have been most badly affected by the social distancing measures. On the other hand, some of the major measures do contain the risk that quite a lot of it will be deadweight, so basically spending public money to encourage activity that would have happened anyway. The job retention bonus is going to go to all employers who keep their workers on. So many of the 9.4 million workers that have benefited from the furlough scheme may well have been brought back in by their employers anyway. So potentially a fair chunk of that money will go to employers who didn't really need it. It may not be best focused on those employers who are going to most struggle over the next few months. Similarly, the stamp duty cut, significant chunk of that money is going to go to people who would have bought houses anyway, and there's a question about how much that is going to stimulate new activity. And the VAT cut, I mean, people were talking before the Chancellor's statement about schemes that other countries have adopted, which have used instead sort of an approach of offering vouchers to particularly lower income households who are more likely to be the ones whose spending would be constrained without that sort of help. In contrast to the VAT cut, it's easier to implement, but obviously it generates a benefit for everybody, including to higher income households who we know have saved quite a lot over the last few months and therefore may need less encouragement to go out and spend that money.
Okay, good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Gemma Tetlow there from the Institute for Government.